Well, a warm welcome to today's talk. It's now Thursday and it's the new month. It's the 1st of April. Now, I want to start off with some news from Europe that, to be quite honest, isn't particularly good. Let's just have a look at that on the screen. And here we see really quite rapid increases in quite a few European countries. Now, I've put the United Kingdom there down as a reference point. And then in increasing order, we've got Ireland, Germany, Italy, Belgium, Sweden, France, Poland and Hungary with high numbers of cases. And we're going to take a look at some of the reasons for this. It's new variant driven, but a little more detail on that in a minute. So really quite concerning developments in Europe at the moment. Now, I want to just give a sort of a bit of a flash into the future, or what I hope is going to be the future, I believe is going to be the future. And this is data from Israel. Now, so well over half of the population of Israel now vaccinated. So over 10 million doses of vaccine given. And we look at the time scale here, and we see this is from December through to March. So the vaccination programme starting there in mid-December. Now let's look at the next slide here. And this is new confirmed COVID-19 cases. So the vaccination started in December, around about then. Cases carried on going up because we know it takes 2 or 3 weeks for immunity to develop. And then cases started going down. So a really satisfying looking reduction in cases in Israel there with just the right amount of time. So you give the vaccine 3, 4, 5 weeks later, the immunity increases, and that correlates very well with what we see in Israel. And this is encouraging because I expect we're going to see this everywhere where the vaccination programme is rolled out to the same level it's been in Israel. And of course, countries are catching up, but this is happening. So that was the cases. And again, we'll look at the time there. So the cases started to go down so the vaccine started being delivered in the middle of December. The cases started going down in the middle of January. What about deaths? Well, as we would expect, middle to the end of January, with that normal delay, deaths also started going down as well. So the number of deaths there dramatically reduced. And so this is exactly what we would expect. The vaccines followed by the reduction in cases, followed by the reduction in deaths. And I really believe that once we get to enough vaccine levels in the UK, Europe and the United States, and indeed anywhere in the world, we're going to see a similar pattern. It's not eradication, but it's a massive reduction. So there's plenty of hope, but at the moment there's difficulties. Now, this is the situation in Europe at the moment. And what's concerning now is, well, we know that the main increase in cases in Europe at the moment is the British variant of concern, the Kent mutation, the B117. So that's caused the initial increase in cases in Europe. But now we're also seeing emergence of the South Africa variant of concern in Europe. Now, it's been documented through genomic analysis to be in 23 out of 27 European Union countries at the moment. Belgium, there's 557 cases, which is 6.4% of sequenced cases. Now, if this had been the old type variant with the South Africa variant, we could have firmly predicted that the South Africa variant would become much more prevalent. But given that the South Africa variant is now essentially competing with the British Kent variant, I really don't know what's going to happen there. I'd imagine both would carry on increasing in prevalence. But whether there's going to be more cases of the South Africa variant and then fewer proportional cases of the Kent British variant, we don't yet know. But it's basically bad news that they now have both. So Belgium, not so good in terms of South Africa variant. Germany, 535 cases of the South Africa variant identified as well. Austria, 15% of sequence cases. Luxembourg, 13.8% of sequence cases. So this means we have community spread of the South Africa variant in Europe, and that will continue. How quickly it continues depends on the way it competes with the British variant, which I don't think we yet know. But the South Africa variant is concerning. Now, Chris Whitty, Chief Medical Officer in the UK, the main thing we're concerned about is the risk of importing into the United Kingdom variants which could have reduced effectiveness of the vaccines we're currently using. So, are our vaccines going to be as efficacious against the South Africa variant? The answer is probably not quite as much as we would like. There probably will be a reduction in efficacy. But we do expect that the current vaccines are still going to protect against severe disease and death in the majority of people with the South Africa variant, hopefully the vast majority. But it is a concern that this variant is coming. Of course, vaccines are being tweaked that will be more effective against the South Africa variant, but they won't be with us till autumn. And implications for travel, of course, are huge. It's many of you. We did the report yesterday on the origins of the virus in China, and many of you said, expressing so much frustration that international air travel wasn't shut down. If international flights had been shut down in December 2019, January 2020, we probably wouldn't have this pandemic. But they weren't. The World Health Organization said carry on flying for quite some time. Airlines were happy to fly in and out of China. China allowed it to continue. And we have this pandemic. And now we have to restrict flights to stop spread of the South Africa variant. Is it going to be done? This idea that we can fly around the world all the time at a whim almost, as long as you can afford it. Maybe we need to rethink that. And certainly for some period of time, I think we need to rethink that. Right, going into France, just to illustrate the problems in Europe. Mr. Macron on live TV, basically another lockdown, schools closing for at least 3 weeks. Lockdown measures extended to more districts, non-essential shops closing from Saturday, a couple of days' time. Ban on travelling more kilometres from home without a good reason. In France, you need to print yourself out like a certificate that is open to inspection and has to be in order. Curfew, I'm not sure what the curfew is in France at the moment, but it's certainly going to be 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. So, interesting. We never had a curfew as such in the United Kingdom, but that's the way that France has gone. And people are going to be given the Easter weekend to get themselves to where they want to spend their sort of 3-week lockdown. So, and of course, this is all, well, not all, but largely new variant driven. And things could get worse in Europe for some time. And we know that medical facilities in France are already extremely, extremely stretched and are likely to get worse actually in the next few weeks. So difficult time for Europe coming. There's no two ways about that. It's sad that this is still with us, although to be fair, much of it could have been anticipated. Now, yesterday's talk about the origin of the virus. I'm not going to comment on that today. I'm just going to give you some quotes on this. This is James Metzl, World Health Organization International Advisory Panel on Human Genome Editing. Right, so he's some sort of recognised biggish cheese by the sounds of it in the World Health Organization. Now, what he's saying is that the team were very keen to point out that it was, I can't remember the exact phraseology, but basically it was very unlikely that this virus came from a lab. But that was based on a 3-hour visit to the lab, and this is what James Metzl is picking up on here. They did absolutely nothing to even consider the possibility of an accidental leak, direct quote. And the way Dr. Tedros was speaking yesterday really made you think, reading between the lines. He wants more investigation into the possibility of a lab leak. Really, it does look like that's where his suspicions are. Well, he has suspicions in that area, I think that's fair to say. Otherwise, he won't want to carry on investigating it. James Metzl again. And it's outrageous that they would insert that it's highly unlikely when they didn't even bother to look at it. And that's got a fair point. I mean, they're saying no when they haven't really investigated it. So I think that point gets a tick as well. I think we have to agree with that. What they said presumably means the team. is that they were given the task of examining zoonotic origins of the pandemic. So they were told to examine zoonotic origins of the pandemic, and hey-ho, that's what they seemed to find. So in the framing of the task, a conclusion was already implicit. And I must say I have to agree with James Metzl's thinking here. Most likely, direct quote, that COVID-19 accidentally leaked from a lab. Wow, so there we have this guy who works for the World Health Organization International Advisory Panel on Human Genome Editing. Direct quotes. No comment from me necessary. Now, of course, we all remember Dr. Redfield, director of the Centers for Disease Control, of course, until the new administration. We quoted from him many times on this channel. So Dr. Redfield now, of course, is a private citizen. He's no longer head of the Centers for Disease Control. Therefore, he's allowed to have an opinion. And he's been expressing that opinion. So now I don't think I've got the reference for where this is from, but it's from popular news outlets. I think it was first CNN, but don't quote me on that. Anyway, I've taken this from an article, and these are direct quotes from what I've read that directly quote him. So Robert Redfield, doctor. Now remember, Dr. Redfield is himself a virologist, former director of the Centers for Disease Control, and it's reasonable to assume that when he was director of Centers for Disease Control, he had information that you and I might not be readily available to us. Right, and so direct quotes. I'm of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of this pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped. Now, in England, we put an A on front of etiology, but it means exactly the same thing. Etiology means etiology in English, or etiology in American English means that which causes disease. So there you go. That's his view. Now, other people don't believe that. That's fine. Science will eventually figure it out. Well, yes. If you say so, Doctor, I'm happy to accept that. Science has already said that they have found no immediate progenitor viruses in bats or pangolins. So, will science eventually figure this out? We would hope so. Now, this is Dr. Redfield again. As a virologist, of course, he would know. It's not unusual for respiratory pathogens that are being worked on in the laboratory to infect the laboratory workers. I do not believe this somehow came from a bat to a human. Direct quotes from Dr. Redfield. And at that moment in time, the virus came to the human because one of the most infectious viruses that we know in humanity for human-to-human transmission. So what he's saying here is this human-to-human transmission, but I think he's saying that there's no evidence of the animal-to-human transmission that originally caused that. So he says normally when a pathogen goes from an animal to a human, zoonotic to a human, it takes a while to figure out how to become more and more efficient. So what he seems to be saying here is that this virus, whenever it started, basically hit the ground running and was highly infectious straight away. And normally you would expect time for that level of infectiousness or transmissibility to evolve. So not a proven fact. I'm allowed to have opinions now. So there you go. Dr. Redfield thinks that's the most likely thing is escape from a laboratory. I'm not going to say in contradiction to the World Health Organization report, but perhaps in tension with it. One more thing Dr. Redfield said. Believes that the virus began spreading perhaps in September or October. So looks like he thinks the virus may have started in September or October, spreading in Wuhan, presumably. So, two opinions there. No need for me to comment. Those opinions have got tremendous force behind them already. Anything I would say wouldn't help. But that's their views. So, interesting. Needless to say, we'll be following this with some interest. It's going to be interesting to see what the response is to Dr. Tedros's comments. wanting further investigations into this area as well. So one gets the feeling there's more to come on this story. Vaccine news. Germany and the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, Germany started with the AstraZeneca vaccine for under 65s only. Then they suspended the use. Then it started again after the European Medicines Agency. Now they're only giving it to the over 60s. So it's a bit confusing, isn't it? So they started out with the AstraZeneca vaccine saying it didn't work for old people. So they only gave it to, started with the AstraZeneca vaccine for under 65s only because it didn't work for older people. Now they're worried about the side effects in younger people. So they're only giving it to older people. I think I said that the right way around. Now only giving it to the over 60s. So if you're under the age of 60 in Germany, you would no longer be given the AstraZeneca vaccine as we understand it. France, it's currently only used in the over 55. So again, under 55 in France, not being given. Now, what is the reason for this? Well, what they're worried about is these cerebral sinus vein thrombosis. Now, we've talked about this before. Now, we know a thrombosis is a blood clot in a blood vessel where there's not supposed to be one. And when this was originally talked about, we looked at the possibility of the condition called venothromboembolism, where deep venous thrombosis spreads up to the lungs and causing pulmonary embolism. It now seems pretty clear that the vaccines are not causing this side effect. Indeed, the vaccines are probably preventing this by reducing the thromboembolic complications that can be associated with COVID itself. But these are cerebral sinus vein thromboses, which are a separate thing. Now, of course, what happens is the blood goes through the small capillaries in the brain after being fed in by the arterial system. It goes through the capillaries. It drains into small venules. These small venules drain into larger veins. These larger veins in the brain are still relatively small and relatively thin walls, but these medium-sized veins in the brain drain into the cerebral sinus veins, which are basically gaps between the meninges, the layers of the brain. And from there, the blood then drains on back into the jugular veins. So what they're worried about is the blood clots in these venous sinuses. I think a sinus just means a space. So that there's venous spaces between the meninges in the brain that drain the blood back down into the large jugular veins in the neck. So they're worried about blood clots in those. Now, if there is blood clots in those, that causes severe headache. And as well as that, the blood dams back because it's like a blockage in the vein. And that will increase the blood in the pressure in the blood in the small vessels in the brain because that blood's trying to get in. It's like a traffic jam. It's trying to get into the veins, but the veins are blocked. And that can cause hemorrhage in the brain as well. So remarkably serious condition because when the blood pressure, because the backlog increases the blood pressure in the capillaries, that can expand the capillaries to the point where they burst and you can get bleeding into the brain tissue, which of course is a remarkably bad idea. So that's what they're worried about. That's the nature of this phenomena that they're worried about. Now, German medicines regulator, the Paul Ehrlich Institute, we believe, is the medicines agency in Germany. They've documented 31 cases of cerebral sinus vein thrombosis after the AstraZeneca vaccine in Germany. And it's a weird thing because it's often associated with thrombocytopenia. So penia means lack of, not enough of that in the blood. And the thrombocytes, site means to do with cell. So these are the small cell fragments, the thrombocytes. Thrombocell, lack of. Thrombocytopenia basically means not enough platelets in the blood. So unusual combination of these things. So a bit of an unusual condition, and it's so rare people don't really know how common it is anyway. It is more common in older women, I believe, and more common in younger women who are taking oral contraceptives. In fact, oral contraception is an independent risk for this. So they've had 31 cases that they're concerned about. And that was after 2.7 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, that works out at one case, according to my calculations, in 87,000. So Germany seemed to have had one case in 87,000 vaccinated people with Oxford AstraZeneca. Almost all the cases reported are in younger and middle-aged women who are at more risk for this anyway. And the German Vaccine Committee, basically, this, I don't know what that stands for, it must be German, but they've basically suspended this at the moment. Now, just remember that figure there, 31 cases and 2.7 million vaccines. And the key thing is that means 1 in 87,000. Now, in the United Kingdom, when this data was collected, we'd given 11 million doses of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, we're given way more than that now. 5 cases of cerebral sinus vein thrombosis, 1 fatal. Now, this is argued to be no higher than you would expect in the population anyway, although the actual normal incident isn't clear. But 11 million people, about 14, probably 15 million people have now had the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine in the UK. So it's way more than that now. But when there was 11 million vaccines had been given, there was 5 cases. Now that works out at 1 case in 2.2 million. So 1 case in 2.2 million in the UK, 1 case in 87,000 in Germany. But of course, remember, Germany initially was not giving this vaccine to older people. So this vaccine is disproportionately being given to younger people in Germany, because initially they said old people couldn't get it. So does this mean that when you're giving the vaccine to younger people, you're going to get 1 in 87,000 cases? Well, it's not quite clear, but that's what the German authorities are worried about. So that's why they've suspended use of it in the younger age group. So now only given to the over 60s in Germany and the over 55s in France. Whereas, of course, in the United Kingdom, it is consistent that there's much lower levels, 5 cases out of 11 million, because, of course, we started giving most of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine to older adults. Although a lot of people who are in healthcare are younger women who did have the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. So there's still things we don't know yet, but from the UK it looks like it's 25 times less common than in Germany. So clearly more to come on that story. And of course the European Medicines Agency in the UK authorities are still advising the vaccine. Now, Canada has given out 300,000 doses of Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine, and in that they've had no cases of cerebral sinus vein thrombosis. So that's none out of 300,000. Where if it was the same rate as the Germans, you would have expected 3 or 4 cases. If it was the same rate as the UK, of course, you might have missed a case because you're not at the 2.2 million yet. So Canada have responded by stopping AstraZeneca vaccine in under 55s. So that's what they've done. Too early to make conclusions from the knowledge I have personally. But it is a concern that 1 in 87,000 in Germany did get this. For older age groups, of course, it's clear that the virus is much more dangerous than this side effect. But I don't know, is there some sort of problem here that we expect things to be safe? You know, no drug is safe. You can never guarantee safety. You know, I can't guarantee safety when I go to the shops. You know, there's an element of risk in life. So anyway, more to come on that story. It's just that in healthcare we're very used to dealing with risks. Right. So more to come on that story. I don't want to shy away from this. Does it look like there's a very rare side effect that might be associated with the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine? Potentially, yes, it does. Potentially it does. But is this associated with other vaccines as well? I don't think we know that yet. So more data to come. Now, still on vaccine news, just briefly now, I know I've gone on a bit today. Sputnik vaccine, Austria is buying 1 million doses. Austria, European Union, of course. Hungary already rolling it out, but it's not European Medicines Agency approved. So we've got Hungary giving out a vaccine that's not approved by the European Medicines Agency. Austria buying 1 million of them. The coherence there has simply gone out the window. Now, Novavax is going to be important, I believe, pretty soon. Now, in the UK, we're starting to manufacture this in the northeast, in Billingham. If you live in England, you probably know where that is. Now, it's a protein and it's produced by insect cells, and this is intriguing. I don't know which insect cells it is, but they're brewed up insect cells. So this is what they're doing is they're giving a protein which is the same shape as part of the SARS coronavirus 2 protein, presumably the spike protein. Now, we can't really make proteins, but what we can do is string together sequences of the DNA code that code for the protein. Then what we do is we put that code into, in this case, insect cells, and then the insect cells make the protein for us. So the insect cells are able to make proteins, whereas clever human biochemists can't make proteins. But the insect cells make them fine. So they're brewing this up in insect cells, which is, great, fascinating. Anyway, it's a protein. It's going to be 2 doses. It can be kept in the fridge. Now, we have talked about this. The phase 3 trial data was actually released on the 28th of January. 86% effective against the efficacious against the Kent variant. 96% against the original strain, only 49.4% against the South Africa variant. But that wasn't done in South Africa, and that included with 8 people with HIV. But it did seem to protect against more severe disease and death very considerably. So still absolutely well worth having. And the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA, they're reviewing that now, and I would hope we get a result on that, a yes or no, and I expect it to be a yes based on the phase 3 data. Hopefully in the next week or 2, and that would give us an extra vaccine for the UK, meaning we've got the Pfizer, the Moderna, and the Oxford AstraZeneca, and then the Novavax. And of course, we're making it in England as well, which is brilliant within the UK. Now, they'd originally planned to bottle this in Europe, as I understand that. But they've now changed their mind, and GlaxoSmithKline is going to bottle it in Barnard Castle, also in the northeast of England, pretty close to Billingham. So, all produced in England, with no concerns about going back and forward across the English Channel and the complications that could potentially be associated with that in the future. Let's hope they're not. So I thought that was interesting. We look forward to that, and that this could be a big, it will be a big aid to the global fight against COVID. Now, just briefly, I'm just going to go through this very briefly now. International Pandemic Treaty needs to come, and it's starting. So these countries, UK, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Netherlands, Greece, Romania, Portugal, got together. Global settlement for the next pandemic, which we need. World War II style deal where all the countries came together at the end of World War II. Building cross-border cooperation, clearly needed. So interesting to see that this has started. Not enough countries there, of course. We need lots more. But we need to be ready for the next pandemic. So Dr. Tedros comments, so basically there is comments about countries coming together at the end of the Second World War. And he clearly sees the analogy between the end of the war and the end of this pandemic, but the preparation that's required for the next pandemic. And of course, there's nothing not to agree with. The aims were clear: to bring countries together, to dispel the temptations of isolationism and nationalism, to address the challenges that could only be achieved together in the spirit of solidarity and cooperation, namely peace. Well, it's motherhood and apple pie, you can't disagree with that. Could have added something about transparency in appointments to international agencies and meritocratic appointments, but he didn't include that, but never mind. So, but nothing to disagree with there. The leaders themselves pointing out countries need to be prepared to predict, prevent, detect, assess and effectively respond to pandemics in a highly coordinated fashion. Well, no question about that. Will it be done is a different thing. Systems for alerting people about potential pandemics, of course. Improving the sharing of data in live time, that needs to be done, but will that be done by all countries in the world? I think the answer to that is probably it won't be, unfortunately. A distribution of vaccine and personal protective equipment, that could be done, that could be organised. There will be other pandemics and other major health emergencies. There will. I don't think you'll find any informed commentator who says there won't be another pandemic. Everyone agrees there will be another pandemic. No single government or multilateral agency can address this threat alone, that's true. The question is not if but when. Yes, that's correct. The COVID pandemic has been a stark and painful reminder that no one is safe until everyone's safe. Well, that's true to some extent, but countries that have high vaccination levels are safer than others. So everyone's equal, but some are more equal than others, of course. At a time when COVID-19 has exploited our weaknesses and divisions, we must seize this opportunity, come together as a global community for peaceful cooperation that extends beyond this crisis. Let us hope so. So, all direct quotes from the leaders and from the agreed statement of that communique, I suppose it is. Dr. David Nabarro, who I would like to have seen in a much more senior position than he is, much more senior. Without some kind of special action, the world as a whole will not be vaccinated well into 2022. I think he's being optimistic even there. International action needed now, Dr. Nabarro is pointing out, which of course we agree with. During that time, all sorts of problems and variants will emerge. Unfortunately, I must agree with Dr. Nabarro unequivocally, and just a pity he hasn't been more involved, in my view, in senior decision making at the World Health Organization. Dr. Nabarro, of course, was a candidate for directorship of the World Health Organization, but alas indeed, it was not to be. Okay, so that is us for today. Let me just show you one picture maybe. So this lady's recently been vaccinated in the UK. She asked me to withhold her name. And it's just annoying. Why don't people vaccinate in the right place? The body of the deltoid, even without being able to feel the shoulder joint there, I would say the body of the deltoid is about there. So why is it given up there and not there in the right place? And why often do you see people giving it too low, sometimes just because there's a shirt in the way? Should go in the body of the deltoid. Just find it so annoying, and just put them in the right place. Okay, that is us for today. Of course, thank you for watching.